She touched her champagne flute, whispered "Trust the tide," and eased me over the yacht rail for $3 billion. But when they unlocked my Beacon Hill door that night, I was already in the armchair, rocking the baby they swore was theirs. If layered, high-stakes family drama keeps you listening, help more people find these stories by tapping like and subscribing to Not So Perfect Family 365. I'm Evelyn Hart, and if you think blood is thicker than seawater, you haven't met my family. Here's how a sunny Tuesday cruise became a funeral with no body, and the first move in a war I didn't start but fully intend to finish. Boston gave us a blue Tuesday when my son called without his assistant. "Just us," Lucas said. "A cruise to celebrate your hip." I wore the navy wrap dress Grant loved. He built a fintech empire. When cancer took him, the board sent lawyers. The yacht was new and white, named Aperture. Lucas hugged me too hard. Brielle waited in cream linen. Out past the harbor, talk slid from weather to paperwork. "We've been thinking," Lucas began, "about probate. You know how messy it gets." "Messy," I said, watching Brielle's phone at her hip, lens peeking. "Is that the legal term?" She laughed. "You're impossible, Evie. It's just clarity. Temporary power of attorney, medical directive, simplified trusts. If anything happens..." If my hip twinged, my mind didn't. I counted like I always do when I'm angry. Board seats, fun terms, the Zurich tail account Grant whispered about at 2 a.m. "Look," Lucas said, refilling my glass though I'd barely sipped. "The condo, Beacon Hill, the foundation, someone should be ready. Last month you mixed up your meds." I took 2 Tylenol instead of 1. I faced him. "And you know that because..." He flinched. Brielle didn't. "We've been helping," she said. "Since Grant passed, you've been distracted. And Lucas, his consulting firm is scaling. We're acquiring 3 practices." The yacht cost more than 3 practices. I let the silence say it. "Your friend Nora agrees," Brielle added. "She said you've been, what was it, fragile?" Nora Patel, my CFO for 15 years, had stopped returning calls the week the board restructured. "Fragile is what men say when a woman refuses to be handled," I said. A memory rose. Lucas at 8 on a wobbly bike, me running behind, hand on his spine. "Don't let go," he shouted. I did. "Mom," Lucas said, "we just want to make sure you're taken care of." "And your margin calls?" I asked. "Kestrel Credit doesn't forgive losses. The bridge loan, bad blackjack with a suit on." His jaw worked. "That's not accurate," I smiled without showing teeth. "Brielle's wallet knows. Offshore smooths volatility, doesn't it, sweetheart?" Her phone twitched. Below deck a printer coughed. Brielle returned with a leather folder. "Sign these," she said. "Housekeeping." I opened it. The trust waterfall had been rerouted. POE medical proxy. A sunset clause that never set. "You gave me $3 million last year," Lucas said. "Urgent now. Seed money, the yacht's collateral for client optics. We'll pay you back." "You bought a lens," I said, tapping Aperture stitched into a towel. "To look rich enough to borrow more." "Optics work," Brielle said. "Here's the thing," I said. "If you think I'll sign away a life I hauled uphill because I miscounted a pill, you don't know me. If you think you can stage manage grief with B-roll and call it love, you don't know love." I stood. My hip complained, the rest of me didn't. "Evie," Brielle said, "don't be dramatic, we're family really." "Family," I said. Grant used to say family was the only fund that never closed. "Grant," she said, and something mean flickered. "Isn't here." "Mom, please, sign the POE. We'll sort everything when we dock," Lucas said. I looked at my son, the boy with grass in his socks, and at the man wearing my dead husband's watch like a permission slip. Somewhere a door shut inside me. "No," I said. Brielle stepped close, perfume clean as hospital light. At her hip the phone's dot bloomed. She lifted her flute, glass kissing glass. "Trust the tide," she whispered. Pressure at the small of my back, polite, surgical, inevitable, and the white world tilted. Lucas's face didn't choose me. The rail bit. The sea opened, and the last thing I saw was Aperture, stenciled, closing around the sun as I fell. Salt hit like needles. The dress ballooned, the ocean pulled, and every lesson Grant ever taught me about panic tried to leave my body at once. I kicked off the blocky heels, pressed my lips tight, and counted as the cold reached for my lungs. 1, 2, 3, surface. The sky was raw blue. Aperture shrank, white and surgical, the wake chalking a straight line out of my life. I floated on my back the way Grant, and I had on Nantucket summers. His palm under my spine, his laugh in my ear. "You can't make the sea gentle, you just learn the angles." "Hey," the voice was gravel and wind. A working boat cut across the chop, dull green hull shouldering the water aside like it owed him rent. A man with a coil of rope and a Patriot's cap leaned out while a young woman braced behind him. "Grab it." "I've got it," I said because I always say that and missed by an inch. The second throw looped my wrist. The rope burned. He hauled, she counterbalanced. Together they dragged one wet, furious grandmother into the world again. The deck stank of diesel, fish, and mercy. The man knelt and tucked a blanket around me with hands that had mended nets and faces. "Name's Marlon O'Keefe," he said. "This is Piper, you from the White Peacock we just watched pretend it didn't hear you drowning." "Evelyn," I said, jaw chattering. "Heart." Like the tech heart, Piper's eyes went wide. "Holy Grandpa," Marlon's look said later. Out loud, what the hell happened? "My daughter-in-law decided family requires witnesses," I said, "and my son decided he isn't one." He grunted, "We'll call it in." "No," I grabbed his sleeve. "Please don't, not yet. That's not how this works." "I know how this works," I said and heard steel in my own voice. "If you call, they win. They left me for dead to clean up my signature. Let me be dead long enough to ruin their plan." Piper swallowed. "Grandpa, she's on every business page like all the time. If people stop for her, they'll stop again when she's ready." Marlon studied me. His eyes had that Worf squint that measures whether men and truth. "You asking us to lie?" "I'm asking you not to volunteer me," I said. "If the Coast Guard calls, you tell them you saw debris. That's not a lie. My life is floating out there in pieces." He stared another second, then nodded once, a small, unsentimental mercy. "Fine, we didn't see a person," he said to the scanning channel, slow and neutral. "Sea was clean." They steered toward a little working harbor north of the city where the yachts didn't come to preen. Marlon moved with the economy of a man who knew there were only so many gestures in a day. Piper made tea no one drinks on boats, wrapped it in my hands, and held my gaze until my breathing learned manners. "You're shaking," she said. "I was just murdered," I said. "It takes the edge off." She flinched. "Sorry, not your fault," I said and meant it. He tied up at a pier that looked like it had been built by stubbornness. A woman in a red knit hat watched us from a bait shack and then pretended not to. Marlon nodded that old town nod. "You can warm up at my place," he said. "Then we'll see about next steps." His kitchen was pine and calendar magnets, the table scarred with stories. Piper put my dress in the dryer and hustled me into a flannel shirt and sweats that belonged to some former version of Marlon. My skin itched back to life. The mirror above the sink gave me a stranger, seaweed in my hair, mascara like war paint, a woman who'd finally dropped whatever she'd been carrying for decades. Marlon set 2 mugs down, black coffee that could dissolve a nail. "Talk," I told them, the call without the assistant, the folder with the sunset clause, the offhand uses of the word fragile. Brielle's phone turned just so, always catching me drinking but never lifting my glass. Lucas saying housekeeping and meaning erase you. When I got to the rail, my voice did a thing I didn't authorize. Piper slid a box of tissues within reach and looked away like a decent person. "Okay," Marlon said when I finished. "What's the play?" "Cash," I said. "Quiet, a place without paperwork. If anyone asks, I drowned, I need one day." Piper tapped her phone. "There's a room over the bakery 3 streets up. Mrs. Larkin, cash only. She'll ask if you eat gluten and nothing else." "Good," I said. "I'm allergic to pity." We moved quickly. Marlon's truck was old enough to vote twice and kept humming anyway. The bakery smelled like forgiveness. Mrs. Larkin looked at me the way mothers look at kids who insist they're fine, then handed over a brass key with a crocheted lobster on it. "Cash and quiet," she said. "You take the back stairs." On the small bed with the flowered quilt, I opened Piper's borrowed laptop and typed my own name. The first headline hit like a wave. Philanthropist Evelyn Hart presumed lost in boating accident. A photo of me at a gala, slightly out of focus, looked like I'd forgotten where I was. The quote was from Lucas. "Mom has struggled with confusion since Dad passed. We were worried. Please respect our privacy." There was a link to donate to a memory care nonprofit. Brielle, Backlit, and Dewey at the marina said, "She loved the sea." "Bastards," I said to the empty room. My phone burner, prepaid, bought by Piper with cash while I hid in the bakery restroom buzzed. A text from an unknown Boston number. 4 words. Phase 2, Monday, confirm. It wasn't sent to me. It was sent by mistake, a fat-thumbed demon pressing E in Evelyn instead of Elias orally, or maybe they changed my contact name to make themselves feel safer and forgot I could still read. The 3 dots pulsed like a heartbeat, then another message. "Caleb wants the documents signed before noon. Don't improvise, I've never liked lilies. They smell like apologies you can't cash." The church on Charles Street was full of them, white and extravagant, curling over framed photos of a woman who looked like me if you sanded down the edges and dimmed the light in her eyes. I came as someone else. A thrift store black dress, gray wig pinned 2 low, cheap readers, a silk scarf with a stain no one but me would see. Piper had done my makeup like a woman who'd slept, eaten, grieved. Marlon said I could still bail. I told him I was through with floating. "Service for Mrs. Hart?" the usher asked. "Friend of the foundation," I murmured, and he believed me because the rich always have more friends than time. Brielle arrived first, camera ready in matte black, sunglasses oversized enough to show you your own reflection. She clutched the crook of Lucas's arm like an accessory. He had Grant's watch on and a new suit he hadn't earned. When reporters asked for words, Brielle tipped her face to the wind. She loved the ocean, she said. The microphone loved her back. Inside, pews filled with the kind of people who send edible arrangements and invoices. I counted absences. No Patricia Klein, the family lawyer who mailed handwritten notes with footnotes. No Michael Stern, the accountant who could balance a budget on a cocktail napkin. No Alma from the trust company, Alma who never missed a heart milestone and once argued with a TSA agent over my perfume. Their empty spaces rang louder than hymns. But there was Nora. Back row, side aisle, the seat that offered the quickest exit. Nora Patel, my CFO for 15 years, my friend for 20. Sleek bun, severe dress, hands in her lap the way you hold something that bites. She lifted her eyes just once. They skated over me, then dropped to the order of service like it was a spreadsheet. She didn't go to the casket. There was no casket to go to. She didn't hug Lucas. She slid out before the choir reached the second verse. The door sighed and swallowed her. The eulogist board chair, voice like a press release, talked about philanthropy, vision, the soft focus battle with confusion. He said I was generous and occasionally difficult, as if generosity made the difficulty palatable. Lucas took the lectern and called me Mom twice and Evelyn once. He said he forgave me for being stubborn, and people dabbed their eyes like forgiveness was heroic. He did not mention that forgiveness is free and inheritance isn't. A neighbor waved a tissue at Brielle in the receiving line. We all noticed she was slipping. The neighbor said like she was offering a casserole. Brielle squeezed her hand. It's a mercy she didn't suffer, she whispered, and I had to sit down before I stood up and told the room I was in the balcony taking notes. When the pastor dismissed us, the crowd spilled onto the steps into sun that didn't care. A TV van idled. The florist's van idled. I kept my head tipped, the readers low enough to make a small privacy fence. The program in my hand listed donations, in lieu of a memory care nonprofit, a foundation Brielle had once called Brand Hygiene. I moved along the edge, past a cluster of board members comparing calendars, past two cousins I hadn't seen since they discovered Bitcoin, until the stone column let me tuck into shadow. That's when I heard my name, my real name, the one a son uses when he thinks no one can hear him bleed. Caleb says we're fine if we don't improvise, Lucas hissed. He was in the alcove by the side garden, speakerphone low, Brielle angled toward him like a sail catching wind. Phase 2 is only phase 2 if it looks like phase 1 worked. A man's voice came tinny through the phone. Lawyer cadence, Ivy somewhere in the vowels. No last-minute heroics. You'll have the signatures Monday. The affidavit is drafted. Mom's obituary is everywhere, Brielle said. It's playing. Good, the voice said. Keep the Alzheimer's thread visible. Judges like clean narratives, and Lucas Kestrel doesn't like surprises. Pay them today. I need the first transfer for that, Lucas said too fast. Caleb, don't call me that on open air, the voice snapped. We're not amateurs. They weren't, but amateurs don't kill you politely. A woman I used to serve scones to at the foundation bumped my shoulder. Did you know her? She asked, looking straight at me and seeing no one. She was good at raising money, I said. She was good at raising a son, she said and drifted. When Lucas and Brielle peeled away toward the town cars, I followed through the crowd at a Sunday school pace. They paused at the curb and a glossy man with auburn hair and a billable smile stepped out of a dark sedan. He didn't come inside to pray. He didn't look at the flowers. He shook Lucas's hand like a man closing a deal. Afternoon, he said, you've done well. Cal, Lucas caught himself, swallowed the rest. The man's eyes slid over the church, over the cameras, over the world. They didn't slide over me. They never saw me at all. I let them go, counted to 10, then 20, until the curb had memory but not footprints. The lilies breathed behind me. Somewhere, a bell rang the hour the way hours ring even when you're not in them. Across the street, a black SUV idled with a car seat visible in the back. No one sat in it. The driver scrolled his phone and lifted a paper cup to his mouth, bored enough to be dangerous. When Lucas's sedan rolled away, the SUV ghosted after it, windows up, purpose down. I folded the program and slid it into my bag. On the back in tiny type was the reception address, my old house on Beacon Hill. The day bent. The shadow of the church reached for my shoes. I tightened the scarf, lifted my chin like a stranger who had somewhere to be, and stepped off the curb. Behind me, a voice at the door wove through the murmur, soft but clear enough to lift the hair on my arms. Phase 2 tonight, it said. The house is ready. Beacon Hill pretends it never changes. The brass door knockers are polished by ghosts, the brick sidewalks are ankle traps in nice shoes, and the brownstones keep their secrets like good maids. I circled the block twice the way you do when you're about to visit a former version of yourself, then slipped down the narrow service alley to the garden gate. The ivy remembered me. So did the key. The back door stuck on the same warped place it always had. I eased it, breathed with the wood, and stepped into my kitchen, the one that hosted science projects and board members with equal terror. It smelled wrong. Not dust and lemon oil, but new paint and money. A European range I'd never buy glared like a museum piece. Someone had set a charcuterie board for two. Truffled salami, a soft cheese sweating in its own stink, figs arranged in a photo spread no one shot. The refrigerator was full in a way that meant present tense. Berries that bruise if you look at them, organic greens in neat clamshells, a half-drunk bottle of Sansera with the foil still fanned like a shrug. They were living in my house like it was a catalog. I walked past the table where Lucas once did long division, knuckles white, me tapping out rhythms on the wood to trick his brain into trusting itself. "You're good at hard things," I told him then. He believed me until he believed other people more. The living room wore sheets like fever patients. Under them, I could see shapes that didn't belong. A caramel leather sofa that cost as much as a starter car, a glass coffee table shaped like an idea, an entertainment unit squatting like a new landlord. A wall of framed photos had been curated to suggest family. Lucas at a summit with a lanyard, Betrayal with a ribbon cutting. The two of them in black tie on a staircase that used to hold my nieces in Christmas pajamas. Not a single picture of me. Absence is louder when it's framed. The study door was shut. Grant's study, always smelling of cedar and ambition. I pressed my forehead to the wood. "I'm here," I whispered and turned the handle. They'd kept the desk. Everything else was different. The rug was new, a pale thing designed to frighten shoes. Shelves had been reorganized with the confidence of people who never found a book by memory. Papers covered the desk, stacks and clips in someone's idea of control. I didn't touch it first. I listened to the house the way you listen to a child breathing through a fever. Quiet. The city murmured the way it always does. Somewhere a siren sang to itself. I began to read. A tabbed binder, slate gray, labeled in a neat, expensive hand, Project E. Inside, progress logs, dates, bullet points that made a life look like a compliance checklist. Oct. 12. Introduce routine memory screening. Mention misplaced keys to PCP. Nov. 3. Surprise party, capture confusion. Photo asset attached. Jan. 21. ER visit medication mix-up, preserve discharge summary. Mar. 2. Family friend NP mentions concern to board chair, create corroboration trail. APRA. 10. Begin POA conversation. Temporary language. Record. Below the bullets, the initials CM signed off each phase in a thin black line. Caleb again. My fingers went cold in a house that was warm. Another stack. Trust amendments, draft affidavits, a flowchart for asset acceleration events. A list of stakeholders with tidy stipends. Consultant honoraria, medical eval, public relations. My name appeared like a defendant in my own life. In the margin of one document, Brielle's looping hand. Media, emphasize confusion, propose Alzheimer's donation. Optics. Beacon Hill pretends it never changes. The brass door knockers are polished by ghosts, the brick sidewalks are ankle traps in nice shoes, and the brownstones keep their secrets like good maids. I circled the block twice the way you do when you're about to visit a former version of yourself, then slipped down the narrow service alley to the garden gate. The ivy remembered me, so did the key. The back door stuck on the same warped place it always had. I eased it, breathed with the wood, and stepped into my kitchen, the one that hosted science projects and board members with equal terror. It smelled wrong. Not dust and lemon oil, but new paint and money. A European range I'd never buy glared like a museum piece. Someone had set a charcuterie board for two. Truffled salami, a soft cheese sweating in its own stink, figs arranged in a photo spread no one shot. The refrigerator was full in a way that meant present tense. Berries that bruise if you look at them, organic greens in neat clamshells, a half-drunk bottle of Sansera with the foil still fanned like a shrug. They were living in my house like it was a catalog. I walked past the table where Lucas once did long division, knuckles white, me tapping out rhythms on the wood to trick his brain into trusting itself. "You're good at hard things," I told him then. He believed me until he believed other people more. The living room wore sheets like fever patients. Under them, I could see shapes that didn't belong. A caramel leather sofa that cost as much as a starter car, a glass coffee table shaped like an idea, an entertainment unit squatting like a new landlord. A wall of framed photos had been curated to suggest family. Lucas at a summit with a lanyard, Brielle with a ribbon cutting. The two of them in black tie on a staircase that used to hold my nieces in Christmas pajamas. Not a single picture of me. Absence is louder when it's framed. The study door was shut. Grant's study, always smelling of cedar and ambition. I pressed my forehead to the wood. "I'm here," I whispered and turned the handle. They'd kept the desk. Everything else was different. The rug was new, a pale thing designed to frighten shoes. The shelves had been reorganized with the confidence of people who never found a book by memory. Papers covered the desk, stacks and clips, and someone's idea of control. I didn't touch it first. I listened to the house the way you listen to a child breathing through a fever. Quiet. The city murmured the way it always does. Somewhere a siren sang to itself. I began to read. A tabbed binder, slate gray, labeled in a neat, expensive hand, Project E. Inside, progress logs, dates, bullet points that made a life look like a compliance checklist. Oct 12, introduce routine memory screening. Mention misplaced keys to PCP. Nav 3, surprise party, capture confusion. Photo asset attached. Jan 21, ER visit medication mix-up. Preserve discharge summary. Mar 2, family friend, NP mentions concern to board chair, create corroboration trail. APRA 10, begin POA conversation. Temporary language, record. Below the bullets, the initial CM signed off each phase in a thin black line. Caleb again. My fingers went cold in a house that was warm. Another stack, trust amendments, draft affidavits, a flowchart for asset acceleration events, a list of stakeholders with tidy stipends, consultant honoraria, medical eval, public relations. My name appeared like a defendant in my own life. In the margin of one document, Brielle's looping hand, media, emphasize confusion, propose Alzheimer's donation. Optics. Under the papers, a manila envelope marked kestrel statements that smelled like panic. Interest-only payments, penalty triggers. Dates I knew were nights Lucas said he was at the office. A printout of a crypto wallet, the seed phrase split across 2 sticky notes in Brielle's lipstick handwriting, tucked under a paperweight like a dare. Offshore transfers to a friendly island with a postcard name. My son had mortgaged his conscience and my daughter-in-law was laundering it. Something thumped faintly above me. Not pipes, not the heat. A soft, hitching sound. A kitten cough of a noise I could pick out of any chaos in any century. A baby. I didn't move for a count of 5, then 10. The house made the sound again, thin and insistent, a small person broadcasting objection to the shape of the world. My throat did something I didn't authorize. I moved without deciding to, past the framed degrees, past the calendar open to a month they hadn't earned, and to the staircase I'd sat on to tie a boy's shoes. The nursery was in the room that used to be Lucas's. Pale blue walls. A mobile of moons. A monitor light blinking like a low heartbeat on the dresser. Crib held sleep-scented emptiness, but the sound came from the adjoining room, the one we'd used as a guest room and then a storage closet and then a place you close when the grief is too loud. The door was ajar. In the faint glow of a salt lamp, I saw a bassinet. I saw a tuft of dark hair. I saw a fist unclench and clench again like someone practicing being here. "Hello," I whispered to the air because you don't startle babies or ghosts. I didn't touch anything. I let my eyes inventory. Diapers stacked with military precision, a white noise machine exhaling ocean, a rocking chair I hadn't chosen, a half-packed diaper bag with a hospital bracelet looped through the zipper pull. The bracelet read baby heart in block letters. On the dresser, half buried under discharge papers and a glossy welcome packet from Harborview Maternity Pavilion, lay a photocopy of a birth certificate template. The hospital name was real. The dates were not. The mother's line, Brielle Hart. The father's line, Lucas Hart. The ink looked too clean. The signature block for the attending physician had been left for later, as tidy as a forgery waiting for a pen. Brielle had been in couture 4 days ago, flat-stomached on a deck with a flute of excellent bubbles, and not moving like any woman who'd taken a body to the edge and back. The math refused to show its work. Another paper peeked from beneath the packet, as if trying to escape. Intake gestational carrier, sealed with a scribbled first name blacked out carelessly enough to leave the tail of a Y. I took 3 photographs with the burner, flash off, breath held. Downstairs, a car door slammed. Then another. Voices, muffled and bright with performance, moved up the front steps. The lock I'd loved for 35 years accepted a key that wasn't mine. The baby made that small sound again. I stood between the bassinet and the hall, every nerve a wire. The front door opened. Laughter entered like perfume. Brielle's voice floated up the stairwell, easy and practiced. "Will just be a minute." Lucas said, "Phase 2 tonight, Caleb wants proof." The hallway light clicked on, footsteps on the runner. I reached for the diaper bag without knowing why, and my fingers brushed a folded document at the bottom. I pulled it free. The name typed neat as a lie, Noah Grace Hart. The stairs creaked, the kind of sound that betrays you. I folded the paper into my coat, set the bag exactly where it had been, and moved to the shadow by the linen closet as the first head cleared the landing. "Do you hear that?" Brielle whispered. "He's awake. They didn't see me in the linen shadow. Brielle's heels ticked the runner. Lucas's voice went soft in a way I'd never heard around anything but money. "Hey, Noah," he murmured. "You miss us." Noah. So they'd settled on a name for a child they bought like a convertible. "Caleb wants paper," Brielle said. "I want silence." He was fussy at noon, the neighbor could hear. "The neighbor's on the foundation board," Lucas said. "She'll donate and keep quiet." The bassinet rustled. The sound cut something loose inside me that I did not have time to look at. When their backs turned to coo and arrange and selfie, I slid down the narrow servants' stairs, the ones I'd painted myself a summer grant tried to teach Lucas to sand wood. The garden gate caught, then yielded. The alley gave me back to the street. On the corner, a plumber's van idled, decals too new, the driver too still. When my face tipped toward the windshield, he looked through me. Good disguises don't wave. I didn't breathe again until the bakery bell swallowed me. "Mrs. Larkin didn't ask why a grieving donor in a wig needed the back stairs at a sprint. Upstairs, the burner phone felt like a detonator in my palm. "Find me someone who knows where bodies go before their bodies," I told Marlon. "Jasper," he said. "He used to work for the Attorney General. He thinks in subpoenas even when he's ordering coffee." Jasper Quinn wore corduroy and a haircut that didn't care what year it was. He listened like a deposition, eyes steady, pen silent, the kind of man who could outweigh an ocean. When I showed him the birth bracelet photo, the fake white certificate, and the binder labeled Project E, he didn't say outrageous. He said, "We'll need corroboration." "You'll have it," I said. "I want you to see who Caleb is and who's paying Kestrel." He nodded once, retainer tucked into a pocket that had known a lot of folded cash. "Two tracks," he said. "The legal facade and the money, we follow both." He called back 4 hours later from a payphone I didn't know still existed. "Caleb Morrow," he said. "Morrow Haviland, LLP. Estate planning with an appetite. He pitches capacity interventions to families who use the word burden in public. He's counseled on 3 accidental deaths in 4 years, stairs, a pool, a fentanyl patch that was supposedly a nicotine patch. Coroner sign-offs all tidy. And Kestrel, a private lender with claws, sports betting exposure, crypto leverage, whatever keeps a man like your son up at night. He's 2 payments behind. They don't litigate, they visit." He sent me a file-sharing link and then, remembering, drove a thumb drive to Marlon's kitchen. Piper popped it into her laptop while the kettle stalked the boil. Transactions trickled across the screen. Wire transfers to an island with a cheerful flag, stablecoin moving in tidy squares, deposits from an OTC desk called AR Capital. "Aiden Ross," Jasper said. "Runs an off-exchange desk, Instagram full of private jets and protein smoothies. Your daughter-in-law follows him. In 2019, she tagged him at a roof bar with old friends. Old habits. She also shares a private bank account with a Shell LLC in Nevada that he opened. Lover," I said, the word dry as chalk. "Past or present?" "Judging by the pattern," he said. "Not past enough." Piper's fingers danced. "These seed words," she said, zooming in on my photo of Brielle's sticky notes. "Ocean drift, candle, wreath, they're not in the right order." "They don't have to be when you took the picture," I said. "I only need proof she keeps the door." Jasper clicked another window. "Clinic," he said. "The intake heading you shot, gestational carrier Ma 17. I watched Caleb's paralegal pick up coffee at Whitmore Reproductive Services last week. Boutique, private, NDAs like dental floss. They arrange things for people who want a newborn without the 9 months or the questions." "Ma 17, Piper said. "Massachusetts, 17. He slid a photocopy onto the table. It was an intake form half redacted by someone lazy. The tail of a Y had escaped the black bar. The emergency contact box was empty. The birthday said what the mirror already knew. "Meyer Alvarez, Jasper Reed. 17, last known at a shelter in Lawrence. Left with employment opportunity 3 months ago. The shelter filed a missing person report. No follow-up." My stomach rolled. 17. A child had been asked to carry a family and died on the delivery table of adults' convenience if she hadn't been made to die. "Find her," I said. "At least her name." "I just did," he said, and softer. "We'll find the rest." We kept reading. Emails scraped from an assistant's sloppy BCC. A text string from a prepaid phone that belonged to no one long enough to belong to everyone. "CM, Phase 2 tonight. Don't improvise." L, neighbor asks about crying, told her reflux. B, air quality tech coming 11 p.m. garage. CM, good, CO monitor. B, ordered, arrives Tuesday. CM, pity. Piper made a sound that rhymed with the word we weren't saying. "They're going to put the baby in the garage," she whispered. "For an air quality check at 11. "They won't," I said, and surprised myself with the calm in it. Rage wasn't useful if it shook your aim. Jasper drummed 2 fingers on the table, the only nervous tell he allowed. "The nurse on their payroll," he said. There's always a nurse on the payroll. The agency. Piper scrolled. Night shift is Tara Wynn through a scheduler called Arcadia Care. She's got 5-star reviews from rich people who think decency is an assumption. Call her, Jasper said. I dialed the number on the timesheet before caution could catch it. 3 rings. A voice, low and careful, answered with the fatigue of someone who carries other people's nights. This is Tara. Don't hang up, I said. My name is Evelyn Hart. I'm your employer's mother. She stopped. That's not funny. No, I said. But what they're planning at 11 is less funny. And if you stay on the line, I can prove it. Tara, I said, they're going to call it an air quality check at 11. It isn't. It's a story you don't want to be inside. Silence, a nurse's silence, diagnostic, not timid. I don't discuss families on the phone, she said at last. Agency policy. Arcadia Care? I asked. 2 overnights this week, 1 partial. They like how you hum. He settles faster for you than for Betrayal. You set bottles out in pairs because Lucas forgets which he already warmed. You keep the diaper rash cream in the top left drawer because the housekeeper keeps moving it. Another beat. Who are you to know that? I'm the woman whose kitchen you stand in, I said, and the woman whose daughter-in-law just pushed her off a yacht. You're dead, she whispered, and then, smaller, I watched the news. They wanted you to, I said. I need you to see the other channel. We met in the back booth of a diner on Cambridge Street that smelled like bacon and second chances. She came in scrubs patterned with moons, hair in a ponytail a few hours past tidy, badge turned backward. She looked younger than the grief in her eyes. I can't be part of whatever you're doing, she said without sitting. I've got a kid, I keep my shifts clean. I'm not asking you to be dirty, I said. I'm asking you to be accurate. I slid the photos across, the bracelet, the intake form where a tail of a Y slipped under a bad redaction. Do you know this name? I asked. Meyer Alvarez, 17, she sat. I heard a name once, she said. Brielle on the phone whispering because whispering makes rich people think they're merciful. She said, tell Maya to drink the shake, she's small. The next night she said nothing out loud for 2 hours, just stared into the nursery and scrolled. What about the 11 o'clock air check? I asked. Tara smoothed the edge of a napkin. A tech called this morning, she said. Said he's from a company I can't find online. Said he needs the garage clear and the interior doors open. Brielle told me to keep the baby awake so he'll sleep through anything later. She moves the noise machine next to the hallway CO detector like always, says the light bothers her. We both looked at the napkin as if it had an answer. Caleb, I asked. Tall, lawyer eye, she said. Never smiles with his teeth. He came by Tuesday, called the baby an asset. I went to the bathroom and cried into a towel like it would absorb that word. A memory rose uninvited. Lucas at 6, fists tight, stomach hard with colic that didn't know its own name. Grant and I taking shifts, walking the parquet into a track, murmuring nonsense that sounded like prayer. You're not an asset, I told a baby who isn't mine and absolutely is. Do you record anything? I asked gently. Notes, schedules, texts from the agency. Tara took out her phone and turned it so I could see without touching. She kept a nurse's log the way soldiers keep maps. Times, temperatures, visitors. She'd screenshotted every instruction that felt wrong, every time Brielle used Bran like it was a person. A text thread with the scheduler showed tonight in gray, Viro Air, 11 p.m. The number listed as the tech matched a contact in Brielle's favorites named Aiden. Aiden Ross, I said. He launders more than clothes. Tara's mouth tightened. He calls late, she said. She puts the baby down and takes her phone to the stair landing like a teenager. I hear the word wallet more than I hear the word son. Will you help me? I asked. Without putting your license in a bonfire, document, don't provoke, if they try anything at 11 will be in place. We who? She asked. People who know how to listen, I said. People who make paperwork hurt. She held my gaze for a long count. I'm not brave, she said. You took an overnight with strangers, I said. Bravery is a habit you already have. She breathed out. Okay, I'll keep the log. I'll move the white noise machine back where it belongs when she leaves the room. I'll text you when anyone arrives, but if this goes sideways. It won't, I said. I've already been on the wrong side of sideways. We parted with a code that wouldn't look like one if anyone saw it. A weather emoji for each room of the house, a coffee cup for the garage, a lighthouse if she needed me to knock on my own door with a cop behind me. Outside, wind came up the hill and pressed the city flat for a second, the way grief does when it gets a running start. I crossed to Marlon's truck and slid into Pine and Diesel and the kind of silence men keep for thinking. She in? He asked. Yes, I said. And there's more. Brielle's air tech is a man who does not test air. Jasper pulled the number, Piper said from the back seat, eyes on a map that wasn't a map. Same burner Aiden used to book a private detailer last month. Same number that pinged near the Harborview Pavilion the night, 17, I said. Maya was a child. No one said anything you could put in a courtroom. We just let the anger go through us like current, hot enough to light hazards we already knew. At 6:45, Tara texted a sun emoji, nursery quiet. At 8, a cloud, Brielle resting her eyes. At 9:30, rain, Lucas pacing, the kind that wears grooves into a man. At 10:13, a tiny wind gust. The hallway detector's light had been too bright and moved again, this time into a drawer. At 10:51, the coffee cup arrived on my screen. Garage, then he's early. And then 4 words that made the room tilt the way the deck had. It's not a tech. Text landed like an elbow to the ribs. It's not a tech. I could hear Tara's breath through the phone the way you hear a child's breath when you're counting the seconds between coughs. He's got a clipboard and a branded polo, she whispered, but the van has no DOT number and the logo is vinyl cheap. He keeps asking if the interior door from the garage sticks. He's measuring nothing. Where's the baby? I asked. On me, she said. Carrier, he smells like soap and thunder. Then listen, I said, and gave her a plan that wasn't brave so much as familiar. Keep the interior door closed, wedge it with the laundry basket if you have to, set the white noise machine where it belongs, not muzzling the hall detector but singing under the bassinet. I hung up and looked at Marlon. We need a reason for him to go away without seeing us. He stood, already reaching for his keys. Street side or service alley? Street, I said, with lights. 10 minutes later, a fire engine took the corner too wide on purpose, washed the block in red, and sighed its brakes in front of the wrong brownstone with the right effect. Piper, 2 blocks up, called in the smell of gas from a number no one could tie to my name. The not tech flinched at the first squawk of her radio, shifted the weight of a man who'd learned when to leave, and did. Tara sent a clear sky emoji, and then, after a beat, a small blue heart. I hate this, she texted. So do I replied. Thank you for hating it in the right direction. By morning, the city had made itself innocent again. I went hunting for paper thick enough to carry a message without looking like a threat. Mrs. Larkin produced a box of note cards she kept for funerals and feuds. I chose cream, not white. Grief looks terrible in hospital colors, and wrote in my best pre-boardroom hand, reports of my death have been mismanaged. We should talk. E. Piper sealed it in an envelope addressed to Morrow Haviland LLP and added a sprig of rosemary because she's 23 and believes herbs make things true. Marlon drove it downtown and handed it to a receptionist who said, of course, in a voice trained to lie for a living. At 11:47 a.m., Jasper, parked under a no parking sign with impunity, sent a photo from his telephoto lens. Caleb in a glass conference room, reading my card like it was a subpoena written by God. His mouth did a thing that wasn't a smile, and wasn't not one. I pictured his hands itching to call Lucas and decided to get there first. On my way to Beacon Hill, Tara texted the lighthouse. House empty, 40 minutes. I stepped in the garden gate and let the ivy tell me I still belonged. We set the house like a stage. Tara slid a fountain pen with a microphone into the cup on the mantel. I nested another recorder inside the spine of a cookbook nobody cooking would ever open. Piper, quick and quiet, set 2 button cams, one inside the fern on the console, one in the base of the floor lamp that always wobbled. You sure about sitting in the open? Tara asked. Yes, I said. I'm tired of doors. She looked at me like a person who had spent nights being other people's courage and knew it when she saw it. I'll be in the kitchen, she said. If you need me, cough. And Noah. He sleeps better when women fight, she said, and left me the tiniest smile. I chose my armchair, the one Grant bought for our 20th and swore would outlive us. The light came in through the west bay like an old friend. I could hear the house breathe. I could hear the city hold it. I could hear my heart remembers how to be a drum. Keys in the front lock, the door. Brielle's laugh, brittle as spun sugar. Lucas, a half beat behind, the rhythm of a man who woke up counting debts. They turned into the living room, still shrugging off their coats, and a conversation about whether grief looks better on camera in matte or gloss. Hello, darlings, I said, not standing. Brielle screamed, a perfectly pitched, expensive sound. Lucas went sheet white, then ash. He looked behind me for the trick, found none. I drowned badly, I said. Surprise. You, Brielle tried again, words sliding on no traction. This is you can't. Exist? I asked. The obituaries were persuasive, I'll grant you. You looked beautiful on the dock. The Alzheimer's donation link was a nice touch. Optics, as you like to say. Lucas sat because his legs were democratic and voted. Mom, he said, and the word hit me where I'm not armored. I thought. You thought papers were easier to sign if I wasn't holding the pen, I said. How did the air quality check go? Brielle's eyes snapped. What air quality? The one where a fake van pretends to care about carbon monoxide and a real man turns a baby into a problem he can solve, I said. He left when the neighborhood got noisy. Her mask slid back into place. You're delirious. No, I said. I'm done being polite. I took out the cream note card's twin and laid it on the table in front of them. I sent one to Caleb, I said. He reads quickly. He'll be here soon because men like that hate loose ends. Lucas swallowed. We were worried about you, he said, the words chewed to paste. Since Grant, you forget things. I forget exactly nothing, I said. I remember the Zurich Tale account you don't know exists. I remember Kestrel's terms, the ones you didn't read or did and thought you could outrun. I remember you at 8 asking me not to let go of the bike and the way your body learned balance when my hand left your spine. Son, you've been leaning on other hands so long you don't know you can stand. Brielle recovered first. She always does. If this is extortion, she said, careful with the consonants, it's going to play very badly for you. Extortion is when someone demands money to keep a secret, I said. I'm here to put the secret in the window. We can discuss the money later. Yours, other people's, Aiden's. Color blew through her face like a weather front. You don't. No, Aiden Ross. I kept my voice pleasant. Influencer, OTC desk, protein shakes and private jets. Used to be tagged in your photos, still appears in your call log. The number he used to book the air check matches the number that pinged at Harborview the night Maya died. Lucas flinched. Who? The girl, I said. 17, 2 syllables, a last name no one pronounced with care. You bought her body and called it a solution. No, he said, but it was a child's no, the kind that guesses the answer and doesn't like it. Brielle leaned forward, eyes hard. You can't prove any of this. Brielle, I said, and let her name land like a hand on a hot stove. You left your wallet open on my old desk. You keep the seed phrase in lipstick because you don't trust your memory. Should we do it together like a bedtime story? I watched her shoulders set, watched her calculate whether bluff could beat arithmetic. I said the 12 words, in the right order. Slowly, as if reading aloud to a baby. Ocean drift candle, wreath iron ledger, whisper salt pilot harbor violet crown. It wasn't just that her face lost blood. It was the way her spine remembered gravity. Lucas turned to her, eyes blank with the kind of betrayal that has to stand in line with all the others. You told me you hadn't moved anything, he said. Told me? Don't be naive, she hissed, but she was looking at me, not him. You've been naive long enough for both of us. How did you? Because you wrote them like someone who likes the sea but not enough to learn it, I said. Because you forgot the first rule of stealing. You never steal from someone who taught you where the safe is. And because I've been a woman in rooms like this longer than you've been alive, and I know exactly where women like you hide their greed. A small sound came from the kitchen doorway. Tara stood there with Noah against her chest, the sling tight, the baby's hair a soft, dark question mark. She didn't speak, she didn't have to, the room changed to fit him. Get out, Brielle snapped. This is family. It is, I said, and that's the point. Lucas rubbed his face like it might smear off what he'd done. What do you want? He asked. For a terrible moment, I reconsidered the answer I'd polished on the walk over. I want my life back, I said. I want this baby somewhere no one calls him an asset. I want Caleb arrested for business model he thinks is clever. I want your debt paid with sweat that isn't someone else's. And I want to stop the next Maya before she learns what your kind of mercy costs. Brielle laughed, soft and mean. You'll need more than stationery and speeches. Caleb will bury you. Let him find a shovel, I said, and leaned back so the Fern camera could see my eyes. In the meantime, you will text him and tell him the meeting is at this house. Tonight, you will keep your friend Aiden off my block, and you will not walk into the garage with that baby ever again. And if we don't, she asked. You'll discover which of your balances can survive a freeze, I said, and which of your stories can survive sunlight. Choose. We were very still, the 4 of us and the one whose breathing mattered most. Brielle's thumbs moved, a text went. Lucas stared at the carpet like it owed him an apology. A reply pinged almost instantly, Caleb's name a bruise on the screen. CM, change of plan, meeting now, I'm 2 minutes out. The doorbell rang before anyone could blink. Brielle's head snapped toward the hall. Lucas stood, then sat, then stood again, a man who had run out of verbs. Tara tightened her hold on Noah and took 1 half-step backward toward the kitchen, eyes on me. I smiled like we hosted parties here every week. Let him in, I said. We've been expecting company. Caleb Morrow stepped in like the house belonged to him. Navy suit narrow as a blade, hair parted with a ruler, eyes that audited feelings for sport. Mrs. Hart, he said, stopping when he realized saying my name out loud admitted I existed. What a development. You sent condolences, I said. Consider this my thank you note. Brielle's voice found its footing. We called you because. You called me because you didn't plan for variables, Caleb said. Eyes never leaving mine. That's on me, I assumed competency. Competency, I repeated. You teach families to pronounce that word like a verdict. He smiled without teeth. I teach families to manage risk. Starting at 11 in the garage, I asked. Your air quality check was early. A pause, barely there. He didn't look at Lucas or Brielle. Men like Caleb don't check with subordinates while the principal is in the room. You have strong opinions about HVAC. He said, I have strong opinions about babies breathing, I said. Where do we go from here? Somewhere private, he said. Not this address, not with staff. His gaze flicked past the kitchen doorway. Tara had already melted into shadow with Noah tucked tight. We'll execute a capacity affidavit tomorrow. You'll sign an asset guardianship. Your return will be framed as confusion. We'll tidy the documents you mishandled when your husband died. I laughed. It came out wrong. I handled every document Grant signed. I handled him when he was sick. I handled a company while men like you practiced your signatures. Then handle this, he said, quiet as a threat. Disappear. We'll purchase your silence under the heading of care. You'll be comfortable. And the baby? I asked. Family matters are best decided by the family, he said, the sentence polished by years of hearings where truth was a guest who never arrived. Lucas cleared his throat. Caleb lifted one finger. The room obeyed. He slid a card onto the coffee table. Address, time, 2 hours, he said. No more theatrics. He left without shaking hands. The door clicked with the finality of a stamp. No one spoke for long 10 seconds. Then Lucas said, broken and flat, we're in this too deep. You should have said that before the ocean, I said and stood. My body knew what came next before I said it. We don't meet him. We don't give him an audience. We move. Move where? Brielle snapped. Off the map, I said. Marlon had the truck running before I hit the sidewalk. Piper was in the back with a duffel she packed the minute my text said lighthouse. Tara slid in beside me with Noah asleep on her chest, the sling a small tent of safety. She locked eyes with me. He's warm, she said, like an oath. We left Beacon Hill by streets that pretended to be alleys and alleys that pretended to be streets. The seaport unspooled, and then there was water that didn't care who you were, only whether you respected it. We climbed into Marlon's skiff, wind knifing our ears, and cut across the chop toward a gray comma of an island that had one cottage, one dock, and no neighbors who might offer opinions. Inside the cottage, the world shrank to wood and kettle, and a crib Piper built out of blankets and an old lobster crate. Tara checked Noah head to toe the way nurses remind themselves that hope is a verb. I checked my hands for shaking and discovered I still had some left in me. What now? Piper asked. We wait, I said, and we write. I took a yellow pad from Marlon's drawer and began to inventory a marriage, a company, a son. Grant's hand on my back the first day we toured the Beacon Hill place. Lucas at 9, crawling under my office table during a budget crisis because he wanted to be where I was even when I was somewhere no one should want to be. The day Brielle held out her left hand and said, he chose me, and I said, so did I. My burner buzzed. Jasper, where are you? He asked. Someplace no one can park. Good, he said, because you were right about the garage, not the method, the intent. I traced the tech through an equipment rental. He's a contractor out of Queens, named Sutter. He checked into the Wyndham at noon. He checked out 20 minutes ago, feet first. Single shot to the head, room scrubbed. Tara's hand went to Noah's back. Piper swore softly. Marlon stared at the kettle like it had opinions. Caleb, I asked. Maybe, Jasper said, or somebody with longer arms. Either way, they're scrubbing the chain, and Evelyn. I know, I said. Loose ends. Babies make terrible witnesses, he said. If this ring is what I think it is, the calculus is brutal. How fast? I asked. Soon, he said. If Caleb thinks you'll surface, he'll accelerate. If someone above him thinks Caleb's sloppy, they'll accelerate harder. Above, I said the word sour. There's always an above. Task force is listening now, Jasper said. Attorney General's office, not FBI. We keep it state to keep it nimble. I've got a judge who hates being lied to. I need clean audio. I need a confession. I need you not dead. 2 out of 3, I said. Can we move on, Caleb, without tipping him we have a baby? Not yet, he said. But we can tip him that you're scared and alone, which is the same as bait. I looked at Noah. He looked back with the solemnity of someone who expects milk and gets strategy. We use me, I said. Not him. We use both, Jasper said. But we hide the both like it's gold. A beat. Evelyn Sutter had a photo in his phone of your back door. How charming, I said. Time is short, he said. I'll text you a meet where we can wire you properly, tonight. Tara put Noah into the makeshift crib and touched my sleeve. If we have to run again, she said, I can run with him for hours. I used to do nights on an oncology floor. You learn endurance. You already had it, I said. The tide turned. The cottage ticked the way old wood does when it decides not to break. I put the pad down and went to the window. The water had that metallic sheen it gets when weather is changing its mind. My phone buzzed again. Unknown number, 4 words. Phase 3, house fire. Then, from Jasper, almost on top of it, Caleb just bought accelerant at a hardware store in Back Bay. He's not subtle anymore. Piper's head snapped up. Marlon stood. Tara's hand hovered over Noah like a prayer. We go back, I said. No, Jasper said in my ear. We box him in. You don't walk into an arson, you make him light the match where a microphone can see his face. How? I asked. By sending him home, he said. Text him, we meet where it began. He'll think yacht, he'll think harbor. My people will be there. If he brings flame, he brings it to water. I stared at the three of them and at the baby who breathed without knowing the world was trying to stop him. I typed. Where it began, I wrote, 2 hours, no lawyers, come alone. The dots bubbled, then vanished. A minute later, a reply, fine, bring the will, the kettle screamed. The wind rose. On the far side of the water, Boston shrugged on its evening. We packed what mattered. We left what didn't. The skiff bumped the dock, impatient. Marlin killed the engine halfway across and let us drift the last yards, hull whispering, so no one on the public pier could hear us arrive. Landing lights flickered on the empty slips. The world smelled like salt and old rope and choice. My phone chimed once more, a message from a number I didn't recognize, but a voice I did. Don't go to the harbor, it read. You won't leave it. The text glowed like a hand on my shoulder. Don't go to the harbor, you won't leave it. No name, just a number I didn't know and a cadence I did, boardroom calm hiding panic. I filed the recognition for later and called Jasper. Pivot, he said before I spoke. We don't chase Caleb to water, we make him come home. Beacon Hill, I said. Wired, warrant-backed, and watched, he said. The judge signed off. My task force parks 2 blocks out. No sirens until we have the words we need. You feed him a reason to confess. Motherhood, I said, and greed. We set the house like a stage nobody could see. Tara took Noah to the basement, old servant's corridor, a rusted latch, a crate already stashed with formula and a blanket. If anything smells wrong, I told her, you run, don't be heroic, be gone. She touched the sling. He sleeps through storms, she said. We'll make one. Iper checked the gear. The fern cam looked into the living room, the lamp cam watched the hall, the pen mic on the mantel had fresh batteries. Jasper's team hid a relay in the linen closet. Marlin posted in the alley with a radio and the kind of patience men learn at sea. I texted Brielle from the burner. Caleb tried to move us to the harbor. New plan, the house, tonight. She responded with a single word that said everything and nothing, fine. Lucas answered my call on the first. His voice came up raw. Mom, is this real? I said. So is prison. Decide who you're going to be between now and then. I didn't want. You wanted, I said, and cut the line before he could inventory the exceptions. There wasn't time to parent a man. At dusk, the brownstone settled into itself. I took my chair. The house remembered me, or I made it remember. Grant's watch ticked on Lucas's wrist in the photo wall. In my head, it ticked on mine. Can hold 2 truths at once if you're stubborn enough. The bell sounded at 7:30, polite as a butler. Brielle walked in first, glossy and composed like cameras might be hiding under the crown molding. Lucas followed, eyes hollowed out, jaw tight as a stuck lid. You look terrible, I said. Good, it means you're human or on your way. Where's the will? Brielle asked. Where it belongs, I said, with someone who didn't try to drown me. Mom, Lucas started. Don't, I said, not unkindly. You'll get your say when someone who matters asks for it. I let the silence fill with everything we weren't going to fix. Then I set the opening like a lit fuse. You've been telling people I'm confused, I said, soft. Convince me, walk me through phase 1 like I'm slow. Brielle exhaled a laugh. You want a slide deck. I want your words, I said. How you staged a woman's decline, borrowed a baby, and made a boat into a story. She looked at Lucas. He looked at the carpet. The fern kept looking. It wasn't staging, she said finally. It was managing optics. People grieve in messy ways. We cleaned it up. You were stubborn about the POA. Caleb advised an affidavit. Lucas did what sons do. They don't, I said, not the good ones. Lucas's mouth worked. We were drowning, he said. Kestrel was calling twice a day. Aiden said he could move the crypto if you had an heir, I finished. A baby to make the paperwork sing. Don't make it sound like a purchase, Brielle snapped. What would you call it? I asked. An arrangement, she said. People do it every day. 17-year-olds don't, I said. They're still children when men like Caleb teach them words like opportunity. Footsteps outside, not a neighbor, shoes that believed in their own authority. The lock turned. Caleb entered without knocking. Homie, he said, eyeing the lamps. Cozy for a crime scene. No harbor, I asked. A friend persuaded me, he said. The glance he slid at Brielle told me his friend lived in her favorites list and posted videos from tarmacs. He set a leather portfolio on the table, the kind men carry when they want you to believe the threat lives in paper. We're going to make this simple, he said. Mrs. Hart had a dissociative episode following grief and surgery. Tonight she signs a caretaker directive acknowledging diminished capacity. The family rectifies the asset flow she mishandled. A tragic house fire next week concludes an unfortunate chapter. Donations to memory care defer criticism. The narrative is clean. Say the words you mean, I said. Say she dies and we get paid. He smiled like a man indulging a child. There's no need to be vulgar. There's every need, I said. You call babies assets and grandmothers burdens. You kill the inconvenient and build the estate. Something in his eyes flicked. For the first time, he looked at the mantle, the lamp, the fern. He didn't see the wires. Men like Caleb never really see plants. You reached for a second cleaner when your first one died, I said, watching his pupils for the flinch. How tidy can you make queens? You're out of your depth, he said mildly. Let's sign. He opened the portfolio and laid out forms that smelled like insurance and smoke. Lucas stared, Brielle steadied, the pen on the mantle waited. You first, I said, nodding at the top page. Read me the clause where I agree to disappear. You agree to care, he said, tapping a paragraph that used compassion like a knife. For the family, and if I don't? He cocked his head, evaluating which lever would move me fastest. Fear, shame, money, love. He chose love. You have a grandson upstairs, he said. Houses are old. Electricity fails. People fall asleep. A soft scuff in the hall, Piper repositioning herself, or a floorboard remembering every foot that has crossed it. Caleb's gaze flicked that way. I smiled like a woman who'd forgotten what danger is and watched the fern catch his angle. You're on tape, I said. He didn't look at the plant, he looked at me. Everyone is, all the time, he said. Who edits is what matters. Tonight, I said. Me. Behind the linen closet door, the relay sent everything down the line to a van parked under a no parking sign. In it, a woman from the Attorney General's office checked levels with a finger and didn't blink. Last chance, Caleb said, voice low. We do this cleanly and quietly. For the family, I finished. His smile went small and real for the first time. Exactly. The portfolio snapped shut. From his coat pocket, metal glinted. Nothing big enough to scare a courtroom, just a lighter a wealthy man would carry to set rituals on fire. He lifted it like a proposition and said the sentence that would open a door I couldn't close again. You'll go quietly, told me, soft as silk. For the family, Caleb rolled the lighter like a coin. No one wants pain, he said. We provide ease, dignity. Families need a guardian to make the merciful call. Mercy you invoice, I said. Mercy we document, he replied. Palliative framing, capacity affidavits, a caretaker directive. You go gently, finances flow, memory stays curated. Call grief a spreadsheet again, I said, and I'll staple your tongue to it. Brielle steadied. You always rejected help. This is help. This is homicide with stationery. Lucas rubbed his knees. If we sign tonight, does Kestrel back off? Kestrel respects progress, Caleb said. By Monday you're liquid, by Wednesday optics, tragic, brave, donors wash the rest. The doorbell, Piper's whisper in my earbud, it's Nora. Let her in. Nora Patel came in with the face of someone who has balanced too many books. Caleb nodded. Ms. Patel, we've met. I sent the text, she told me. Don't go to the harbor. You were the leak. Yes, she said, not blinking. The board hired me to transition you. Caleb paid for updates, said he needed filings neat if you slipped. I told myself neat was safer than messy. Then they rehearsed your obituary and I started stealing. She put a white plastic drive on the table. His shadow ledger, consultant honoraria to medical examiners, payments to a shell called Viro Air, wires to A.R. Capital, case codes, dates, beneficiaries, 37. Caleb almost smiled. You people and your mythologizing of data. It isn't myth if it balances, Nora said. Brielle's phone buzzed. Aiden, she answered on reflex. I'm at the Attorney General's office, Aiden said, tinny on speaker. They have my wallets, I gave them the Viro number, I'm not going down for your husband's debt. You promised, Brielle's voice cracked. Immunity, if I testify, Harborview Maya, Caleb's success fees. Caleb didn't blink. Influencers panic. They always do. I leaned so the fern cam could read my mouth. How many capacity interventions, Mr. Morrow? Language, Evelyn, it's logistics. He lifted his chin, loving his own math. 37 completions, 0 reversals. Average probate under 90 days. Media sentiment net positive within 2 weeks and 29. We are, if nothing else, efficient. Keep talking, Jasper breathed in my ear. Levels are clean. The hardest part is phase 1, the narrative, Caleb went on. Once decline is accepted, everything else is choreography, a fall, a patch, a pool gate that's always been tricky. Courts cooperate, families are sad and solvent. Lucas made a small sound, there was no exit ramp left for him. Why my family? I asked. The market chooses, Caleb said lightly. 3 billion reasons. An heir in need of structure. A story the public applauds. We curate inevitability, not invention. And the contractor in Queens. Attrition, he said. No one misses a man who doesn't exist on paper. From the staircam, Piper hissed. Hallway CO detector just went dark. A text from the basement, a single match emoji from Tara. I kept my eyes on Caleb. Hear that? The house is paying attention. He stood, voice soft. Sign the directive, we all go home. We are home, I said, and you just told the Commonwealth everything it needed. The linen closet relay clicked, a small legal inevitability. Caleb thumbed the lighter, a blue tongue showed and vanished. He glanced toward the hall, smiling to himself. Efficiency, he murmured. Always the metric. From the basement, Tara's voice rose, controlled, urgent, terribly domestic. Evelyn, do you smell gas? At first it was only a question in the air, Tara's voice through the floorboards, calm and clinical. Evelyn, do you smell gas? And then the house answered for her. A metallic sweetness climbed the stairwell. The living room took a breath it shouldn't have. Caleb didn't turn his head. He watched me the way a chess player watches a rook, not a threat. An obstacle, he thumbed the lighter once more, a blue bead of flame cupped in his palm. Leave the detector, he said softly, eyes flicking toward the hall, doors open. Brielle blinked like her brain needed a moment to match the cue to the scene. What are you? Optics, he murmured, almost fond. An old house, a faulty line. Sleep overcomes vigilance, a family breaks and then heals. Lucas made a strangled sound. Caleb, not now. Caleb said without looking at him. To me, sign. Every cell in my body leaned toward the basement door. My grandchild was down there with a nurse who had bet her night shift on my courage. I could hear the faintest chuff of the white noise machine, trying to turn disaster into weather. I didn't move. I remembered Grant in the ICU, the beep that would not be hurried, how he squeezed my fingers so I'd stand still when the only thing I wanted to do was tear out time and rearrange it. You fight with position, not velocity. Lucas, I said, and the name felt like the only thing left between us. Look at me. He did slowly, as if his neck had been locked in place. Behind the debt and the suit and the watch he hadn't earned, I saw the boy with the paper dragon we burned on the 4th of July because he wanted to see if wishes had smoke. I carried you, I said, when you were heat and noise, and then when you were long and heavy and wouldn't sleep unless I walked the parquet into a groove. I don't want you in prison. I don't want you dead. I want you to choose your life while it still belongs to you. His face crumpled in a way that wasn't rehearsed. He looked at the hall where the gas was, and at the mantel where the pen waited, and at the man who had explained mercy like a billing code. I don't know how, he whispered. You do, I said. You throw the match away. Caleb's head tilted. He extended his lighter toward Lucas the way a man extends communion. Help your mother, he said, and does the kind thing, for the family. The house shifted. From the basement, a match emoji on my phone, then a lighthouse. Tara, steady as triage, door wedged. Smell stronger. Baby okay. Piper's whisper in my earbud from the stairwell. He taped a rag along the bottom of the interior door. It's wet. Accelerant. He'd salted the threshold like a farmer on a crooked field. I stood. The world narrowed to the distance between my hand and Caleb's wrist. You never had children, I said. He smiled a small, truthful smile. Of course not. Then hear me, I said. When a baby is in a house, there is no such thing as tidy risk. He moved the lighter a fraction closer to Lucas. You two can have this argument after she signs. From outside, a radio pop, then silence. Jasper's van 2 blocks away telling everyone to breathe and wait. The relay in the linen closet hummed like a patient. We had the words. We needed the face near the flame. Lucas, I said again, choose. He looked at Brielle, whose jaw was set like a locked safe. He looked at Caleb, who had always given him the next page of the script. He looked at me. Something old and bright came up in his eyes, the last unpawned part of him. No, he said, and knocked the lighter out of Caleb's hand. It hit the rug and skittered under the coffee table. Caleb moved sudden fast, the first animal thing I'd seen him do. He flicked a second lighter from his coat, of course he carried 2, and the room exhaled gasoline. He didn't go for the hallway rag, he touched flame to the drop cloth folded by the mantel. Painters were here, the story would say, and fire ran stupidly eager toward the baseboard like a rumor finding kindling. Basement, I shouted, more to the microphone than to anyone else. Run. Tara didn't wait for permission. The basement door thudded, then the squeal of the old servant's latch. The white noise machine went silent. Noah's cry rose once, thin and furious and utterly alive, and then the sound moved fast under the house toward the alley and air. Brielle screamed, a sound this time from her bones, not her brand. You said, Caleb, you said no one would be home. Sentimentality causes errors, he said, almost conversational, and kicked the burning drop cloth toward the hall. Heat puffed. Smoke threw a gray scarf over the ceiling. I grabbed the throw from the arm of my chair and slapped at the flames. They licked past, greedy, found the rag at the bottom of the door, flared harder. From the alley, Marlon's voice. Go, go, go. His boots hammered the service steps. A window cracked like a pistol, we all flinched. From outside, a compact whoop-whoop of a siren, short and low. The task force was done listening. Caleb Morrow. A voice boomed from the front stoop. The woman from the van given her own echo. The general's office. Step away from the ignition source, hands where I can see them. Caleb smiled with his eyes. Ignition source, he said, as if pleased that the law had learned his language. Lucas froze, then moved past me, past Betrayal, toward the hall where the rag flamed bright. He stomped it with his dress shoe, the sole smoked. He kicked the lighter under the baseboard out into the foyer and stared at it like it might recant. Down. Another command, clearer, closer. Door blew inward with a blast of cold and bodies and purpose. 2 agents in civvies, one in turnout gear, a canister hissing foam. Fire shrank, spat, sulked. Smoke rolled under the crown, molding like a bad thought. Betrayal backed up, hands high. Her phone clattered to the floor and spun and showed me my own face from the fern's angle. For one stupid, human second, I wanted to kick it to stop looking at me. Then I laughed, a short, ugly thing. Who edits is what matters. Caleb moved again, sideways, the way men who memorize floor plans move. He cut toward the dining room, toward the butler's pantry, toward the narrow back stairs that come out near the garbage cans and the alley where Marlon was shepherding my family into air. Stop! The agent barked, lunging. Caleb slipped, not panicked, practiced, through the pantry door, shouldered the service exit, and vanished into the corridor that had carried so many quiet things. An agent went after him. Another took Betrayal's wrists. A third planted herself between me and the stupid, stubborn fire. Lucas looked at his hands like he expected them to confess. On your knees, the man with the cuffs told him. Lucas sank, a slow fold, as if the floor were a new word in a language he'd been pretending not to learn. He raised his palms. I'm done, he said, voice cracked open. I'm done, I'm done. I reached for him and stopped. There are moments a mother saves her child and moments she lets the law do it. Tonight I let the law earn its salary. From the alley, a burst of cold and Piper's voice, high and ragged with relief. We're out, he's breathing. The house exhaled smoke through the open door. Foam hissed. The fern watched everything dutifully. Evelyn, the woman from the van, said, suddenly close, her hand a weight on my shoulder that didn't ask a question. We've got the confession. We've got the attempt. We need the architect. He's running the pantry stairs, I said. He knows the hinge sticks. She touched her earpiece and repeated it into air that carried orders. Somewhere 2 blocks away, a radio answered like a dog. In the front hall, the rag guttered into a mean black smear. In the dining room, a chair had become a sculpture. A family portrait by the stairs went blind with soot. Ma'am, the agent at my elbow said, we need you outside for a check. I'm fine, I lied. My lungs felt like they were trying to leave with everyone else. Betrayal twisted to look at me as they took her past. You ruined everything, she hissed, a last flare of who she thought she was. No, I said, and my voice came out upon a wind I didn't recognize. I stopped a funeral you weren't entitled to plan. She spat my name like a seed and was gone into blue light and paperwork. 2 paramedics hustled up the steps, trailing questions and a plastic case that sounded important. Behind them, a neighbor's face bobbed, avid and concerned in equal measure. I watched the place where Caleb had gone and thought about all the doors I'd opened and closed in this house, the ones that hid Christmas presents and arguments and the inventory of a life. Over the radio, back alley movement, he's southbound, white male navy suit cutting to Pinckney foot pursuit. The woman from the van, Assistant Attorney General, her badge said, Cho met my eyes. He's running for the river, she said. They always do. What they don't know, I said, coughing, is that the river knows us. Another burst on the radio, footsteps, a shout, then 3 words that were not yet the ones I needed. Suspect slipped west. Smoke lifted like a curtain. In the alley, the skirl of a baby settling. In the foyer, my son on his knees, hands open, finally empty. We all looked toward the back door at once, as if the man who had made a business of endings might still be a silhouette in it, as if you could lasso a shadow before it reached the next street, and saw only the corridor's thin slice of night, the line of brick, and the hinge still swinging. They found him by the river where the city pretends to be a postcard. Caleb cut down Pinckney, shoes slick on brick, calculation failing him for the first time in a decade. Marlon was already moving, a skiff nosed into the dock like a question. Piper stood on the gangway with a coil of rope and the moral certainty of 23. Evening, Marlon called, low and regular as tide. Don't. Caleb glanced at the water at the dark under the dock that had swallowed better men. He went anyway. He jumped for the piling, missed dignity, caught splinters. The skiff eased sideways, blocking air and option. Piper's rope whipped once, true. When the task force came over the railing, he was wet only from the knees down and furious about something so small. Caleb Morrow, the Assistant Attorney General Cho said, cuffs already in her hand. You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, arson, wire fraud, elder exploitation, and enterprise corruption. He tried to smile, found nothing to wear. You don't know who my clients are, he said. We know who your victims are, she said, and the click around his wrists sounded like someone closing a spreadsheet for the last time. The city unlaced itself over months. Subpoenas sprouted like early crocuses. Viro Air was a closet with a printer and a glorified invoice template. 2 medical examiners resigned before breakfast. 1 cried on the 6 o'clock news. 3 probate clerks who'd been fast-tracking capacity affidavits discovered how long a day is when it's counted in charges. Aiden Ross, pale and suddenly mortal, turned over his wallets and his smile for a cooperation agreement. The Harborview intake coordinator took a plea first. The attending physician followed, his voice small when he said the word Meyer in court. Caleb went to trial because men like Caleb don't believe in juries until juries believe in them. The Ferns footage played on a screen larger than his confidence. He sat very straight while the Commonwealth added each count like a bead. When CHO asked how many completions, he didn't answer. The recording did, 37. The jury came back before lunch. The sentence was life without parole. If he'd been shocked, he knew better than to show it. Lucas and Betrayal did not get juries. They got plea deals and timelines. 25 for him, 20 for her conspiracy, attempted murder, fraud. In the defense allocution, Lucas said, "I was drowning." The judge, a woman who had heard every tide metaphor Boston could offer, said, "Lots of people drown without dragging anyone with them," and read the time into him. Betrayal stared at a spot on the wall as if she could frost it over. Nora came to court in flats and the unstyled hair of someone who had stopped performing. The judge looked at the drive on the evidence table, consultant honoraria, shell accounts, dates that lined up with funerals, and called it substantial, original cooperation. Nora took 3 years suspended, 2,000 hours of community service, and the long, slow penance of telling the truth at community centers, where people remember the names of those who show up twice. The adoption hearing was held in a courtroom with bad art and excellent light. Noah wore a sweater Piper knit too fast and a solemn expression like he'd been briefed. Tara sat behind us with a thermos of coffee and the stillness you only earn on night shifts. I brought a letter addressed to Alvarez family, care of the shelter in Lawrence, and watched the clerk promise it would find its way. "Your Honor," I said, palms dry for the first time since the ocean, "his middle name will be Maya. He should carry the truth in the middle of him." The judge was in her 60s with eyes that had seen budgets and children and the way the two collide. She read the social worker's report and the affidavits and finally softly said, "MS. Hart, I expect you'll tell him everything." "I will," I said, "and when he's old enough to be angry about how the world turns, I'll stand still and let him be." The gavel fell like a small door opening. On the way out, Tara touched the edge of the stroller and smiled in the way nurses do when a story ends at home. I went back to the house after the painters scraped the smoke from the molding. We left the scorch on the baseboard, a thin black scar shaped like a warning, and framed it behind glass. People call it macabre. I call it accurate. The Fern went to Piper's apartment. She said it had earned retirement. Kestrel's founder was indicted in a separate case with a name too complicated for any headline. The fund of funds that had been underwriting structured grief shuttered its doors without a statement. Somewhere an algorithm adjusted its appetite for men like Lucas. Somewhere a young associate cleaned his resume of certain case codes and went back to school to be a teacher. With the Zurich Tale account Grant had whispered about on nights the morphine made him honest, I started a fund, the Heart Project, for elder justice and chosen families. We hire nurses to audit caregiver affidavits. We pay for second opinions no one's insurance thinks are urgent. We teach people to insist. Some weeks it feels like emptying the ocean with a spoon, but sometimes spoons matter. Letters came. Some were cruel, most were not. People sent me their parents in paragraphs. They wrote, "I think my sister is moving my mother toward a cliff, and my son says I'm forgetful. I am, but not like that. Thank you for naming the thing out loud." I answered more than I ignored and handed many to people with badges who had earned my faith. Lucas writes from prison. Sometimes he asks about the weather and my hip and Noah's firsts. Sometimes he asks for forgiveness like it's a form you file. I sent him a photo now and then, a toothless grin, a lopsided block tower, and once I sent a copy of the gavel order with the middle names circled. When he asked if he could see us, I said, "Not yet," and meant maybe if the boy wants to and the man you are meets him in the light. Betrayal doesn't write. Aiden sent a Christmas card of a beach he probably isn't allowed to visit and a note that read, "I talked." They listened. It's not penance, but it's something. I didn't send a card back. Nora comes by on Fridays with bagels and spreadsheets. We sit at the kitchen table and speak in the language we both speak best, balance, reserve, runway. Once she picked up Grant's watch, turned it over and said, "He would have been amused by the audacity." I said, "He would have hated the flowers," and she laughed like a woman on parole. Some afternoons I tell Noah the kind of truth children can hold. You had two mothers, I say, rocking him in the chair that almost burned. One carried you and one carries you. He gurgles like that's obvious. Later, when he asks about the scar behind glass, we'll sit on the floor with snacks and call things what they are. On a Tuesday that looked exactly like any other, the doorbell rang. Piper beat me to it, opened the door 3 inches, the safe amount, and looked back at me with her eyebrows in a question. A woman stood on the stoop, mid-40s, hair in a rush, eyes with no patience left. She held a thin file folder against her chest the way people hold bad news to keep it from leaking. "MS, heart," she asked. "Yes." She lifted the folder. On the tab, in the neat, expensive hand I had learned to recognize in my bones, 2 letters were written in black ink. Not E, not M, R. They called it Project R, she said. They did it to my mother. The house held its breath. Somewhere behind us, the baseboard scar went on being honest. I put my hand on the door, not to close it, but to feel the weight of it. Noah babbled in the next room, inventing a language where family is a verb. "Come in," I said. "You're not the first."